when I read chapters 5 and 6, I learned a lot about how numbers, we need to learn more about the foundation of numbers and not so much the number itself. Classification is an important skill because it gives that broad sense of numbers. An activity was that one where you separate into different groups. This is a good idea, I think, but it warned us to be a little bit careful with the younger grade, which is I'm trying to teach, because they might not do so good with more than 3 groups. Then we don't want to leave anyone left out either, but that's an activity that I would certainly try. Maybe something more along the lines of what they said, those wearing shoelaces and those not. Patterns is important as well. It comes up a lot later, so if the students, I think, are learning the basis of patterns, they can pick them out in the harder math problems that come along. Difference between rote and rational counting, where they can recite it, otherwise it's one-to-one correspondence. So rote counting is kind of before rational counting. Rote counting is more like memorization, and rational counting is where they actually know what's going on. I like learning about the different counting abilities, and that way I can kind of gauge where my students are at and what they already can do and what they can't do, if they can add on, and then kind of math talking with them to figure out, like, okay, you already have 11 items, so let's start with 11 and then count these 3 more that I added. So 11 and then 12, 13, 14 without having to recount all of them. It just makes it more efficient. It's important to represent numbers other than just the typical numbers that we see, because when students see that number, they just start thinking that number instead of like, oh, 2 is like 2 erasers. When they think in more material items or different symbols, they think more deeply about it. And then lower grades, you should start estimating smaller amounts. And then place value development is when they start to learn. They have 5 different steps here, and they start to learn the different place values for sure. It can be very slow going of understanding, especially in stage 1 and 2, but to get them up to the stage 5 where they understand it completely is very important and something I'd like to work on in my classroom. Grouping activities, like the whole chapter says, is important for the foundation of teaching, and using manipulatives in math is extremely important.